So, this video, what we're going to do is try and explain, because I understand that it can be quite confusing because there's lots of talk about how projects are built, how swimming ponds are built. I've done a ton of research. I've also been to lots of projects built by other companies, built by us obviously, and it's given me a unique insight into how swimming ponds are built, why they're built a certain way. And I've also spoke to people who were there when swimming ponds started and how they got to where they got to. So this is a bit of an intro. Swimming ponds have been around for 30, 40 years, been around a long time, okay? Probably in the last 20 years have probably really been in the mainstream. And when they first started out, I was speaking to a chap from Germany who's part of the Germany Swimming Association, and they were really like the pioneers of swimming ponds. And what he said to me is when they started out, they wanted to differentiate them as much as they could from swimming pools. So they wanted to make sure that it was obvious what the differences was. So for example, they wanted to make sure that people understood they were natural. And so one of the things they did when they came up with the concept was to have it so that they didn't have a lot of equipment on them, but what they also wanted to avoid doing was just landscapers picking it up and just shoving UVs on and creating clear water, because that's only one side of it. It's not enough to create the complete package. What I've done over the past 7 or 8 years is continuing to research and develop, improve our system and make it the best system on the market. And the way that we've done that is by understanding how they're traditionally built and then how we can improve it. So I've got a little animation video which is going to pop up in a minute that just shows you what I'm talking about. So the best way I choose to explain it is a traditionally built swimming pond, which is built like this in America, over mainland Europe, in the UK, lots of places in the world, is basically like this. So the concept is kind of based on a gravel fed system, like on a fish tank, okay? So it's got a gravel bed in there, and what it does, it draws the water through the gravel. And what this does is any kind of waste is kind of clumped into that gravel, and it keeps the aquarium clear. But of course, over time, the aquarium becomes dirty. And because it becomes dirty, what happens is you have to take all the gravel out and then you have to put new gravel in. Now, a swimming pond, traditionally built swimming pond, is basically this, but on a much larger scale. Okay, so obviously much larger. And we don't also have the same waste problems you have in a fish tank, because in a fish tank you've got fish creating waste all the time, whereas in a swimming pond we've got a bit from wildlife, a bit of ammonia off our skin. It's not as much as it is in a swimming tank. So the gravel bed system wants ripping out and redoing in an aquarium, and it might need doing fairly often, but in a swimming pond it's quite different, and it might be years before it needs doing. However, it will need doing. So in a traditionally built swimming pond, they have very deep planting beds. So because of these deep planting beds, they can, the plants root in them obviously, and they run the water through them. So what happens is, over time, is you get like a build-up of silt. So silt starts to build up in these beds. And because the silt builds up, what happens is the nitrogen cycle, which is really important, then can't happen, okay? So when I was looking at how traditional ones were built, what my research told me, and the many projects I've been on told me, there is a time period that they will function for. Let's say that's 5 years, 10 years, and then they're going to want rebuilding. Now the problem with rebuilding them as well is all the gravel has to come out. Now a lot of projects I've seen a lot done where they retain them with sandbags. The problem is when you take the water out, they collapse. So basically you've got to rebuild the whole thing to create the right environment. But this is why it's so important. So the trigger, I think, that really got me involved in this is blanket weed and algae growth. So swimming ponds, getting the water clear is not necessarily that difficult, but stopping algae from growing is quite difficult. So that's the one thing we really have worked hard on in my company. Now, algae growth depends on, ultimately, it's about the food source that it needs to grow. So what we did is we went, what's the cause, not the problem? So we understand what the problem is. The problem is algae growth, the amount of time it takes to take it out. But what is the cause of that? How can we prevent it from even living? So the way to prevent it from even surviving is to reduce the amount of nitrates in the water and phosphates. Now, the way you do both of them things are very different. So when I looked at this system, the traditionally built system, I kind of got a list of problems that were created. So one is that silt buildup. The second one is the nitrogen cycle spike. So because there's nowhere for the nitrogen cycle to happen, because they're all built up with silt and anaerobic bacteria, you haven't got sufficient good bacteria in there to actually bring ammonia to nitrite to nitrate. The other thing I've also noticed about the way they're traditionally built, they don't have sufficient nutrient barriers, and that's stopping water actually getting into the pond. Because if you've got water getting in, that's another way of phosphates getting in from surrounding land. The other one is silt management in the main pond. So in the main pond where you've got the swimming area, if you don't have a way of mechanically removing that, then again you're going to get silt build up in the bottom of the pond. And I've been to some large projects that have been installed 10, 15 years ago, and they've just got this massive build up of silt at the bottom. So the only way to counteract that is a lot of maintenance, pond backing it out. The other one is algae control. Because these ponds have nitrates in them, especially when they're a bit older, and phosphates, because generally speaking, the way traditionally swimming ponds are built, they don't have anything to manage the phosphates, then you get a lot of algae in there. I also noticed that a lot of them don't use a lot of air pumps, so there's no dissolved oxygen in there. So dissolved oxygen is really important, especially in terms of algae control. And then the next one is phosphate management, and they don't seem to have anything in there for phosphate management. Now we have, as a company, like three rules for every single install, and that is they're going to deliver the safest swimming ponds in the world to protect you and your family. We're going to have the cleanest and easiest to maintain swimming ponds, saving you time and hassle. And we're going to build ponds that are there for longevity, are built to last. That's really important. So it's not, you don't need to rebuild it in 10 or 15 years' time. You might need to change the sponges and the filter, but you're not going to need to do mass changes. So what I'm going to firstly talk about is the importance of the nitrogen cycle. So what the nitrogen cycle is it's about good bacteria in the pond, and what it does is it takes ammonia. So ammonia is waste. So it could be, so in a fish pond, it's from fish. It comes out the back of fish, basically. Okay, that'll be pure ammonia. Okay. So in a swimming pond, it's on our skin, so it comes off in sweat. That's ammonia. Have ammonia in it. Also, wildlife waste would create ammonia. Plants like leaves and deteriorating in the pond, that's going to turn to silt, and that will then turn to ammonia, to nitrite, to nitrate. So what the bacteria does, it turns ammonia to nitrite to nitrate. Okay, and the nitrate is either going to go through, is going to be used for the plants to grow. So in our projects, that's what the plants will use to grow, but we keep it at a low level so it doesn't allow blanket weed to take over, okay, and take all the nitrates out. Because blanket weed management is about making sure it can't grow in the first place, so it can't take over. Because it's so aggressive, it can grow like a metre a day. So because it's so aggressive, we have to have some way of managing that. The other one I think is really important to talk about is the phosphate management. So we do lots of things in our swimming ponds to manage phosphates. We have stuff to reduce it on the inline. So you understand what phosphate is. Phosphate is, it's actually in our tap water. The reason they put it in tap water is to help block leaking pipes. The problem with phosphate is it's also what blanket weed uses as food. So because of that, we have most places around the country have quite a high reading. I went and seen one yesterday that had a 1 reading. I've seen it as high as 10. And the level we need parts per million is 0.035. And that basically means a blanket weed can't grow. If you get it below that level, it can't grow. The other one is pH management. And a lot of these projects that I see, the pH management hasn't been put in place. So what you find is the GH and KH are either too soft or too hard. And what happens is pH is unstable. And if pH is unstable, the plants can't take phosphate in as food. So that creates a problem for trying to manage the phosphate level. The other thing is dissolved oxygen, which I've talked about. And dissolved oxygen is, you need a well-balanced pond, and dissolved oxygen is a really important part of a well-balanced pond. The other one is UVs, and putting UVs on swimming ponds is such an interesting topic. I did read on somebody's website, they said, it kills, the thing is with UVs, it kills good bacteria and bad bacteria, that's why we don't put it on our swimming ponds. However, when you've got a filter on it, the filter stores the good bacteria, so actually the UV can't kill what's in there. So what the UV does is kills bad bacteria, which is what you want it to do. And the reason why that's so important, I did another video, which is on our website. I think it was a podcast that we did, I think it was number 9, with Caroline Murray, who's a microbiologist and biochemist, and we talked about the risks of being in a swimming pond. And there are risks. The risks to everything, let's face it. But ultimately, in a swimming pool, you have chlorine, it kills everything, okay? But there is still risk to being in a swimming pool. But things like, let's take E. coli, for example. If E. coli was to get into the system, what a UV will do is it will destroy it at the DNA level. So as soon as it goes past it, the UVs, it will destroy it. If you don't have a UV on, and in a traditional built swimming pond, because they don't have a UV system, if E. coli gets into there, it will cultivate areas in that, especially in these big planting areas that they've got, and E. coli can actually thrive. So in our system, we have very shallow gravel areas where the planting is, and because of that, it can't really cultivate the same way. And we move oxygen through it, we move the water through it. It doesn't really allow it to settle, and that means we're pushing it. So if E. coli was to get in, we're pushing it round and then going through the UV, which again, it is a system we've developed to help make it as safe as possible. Which, I've got 4 kids. I've got twin boys that are 4 years old. Safety is everything. It's important. It's our family, and we're putting this in for a family to enjoy and have fun in. So we want to make sure that they're as safe as possible. So I suppose the question you might want to ask is, why would they say this isn't the way to do it, and why ours is better? Well, there are higher running costs to the way that we build it, because there's more equipment, because we've got UVs on it, because we've got, generally all swimming ponds have pumps in them, or have pumps as part of the way it works, and air pumps, most of them do that. So the only difference is really the UV, but I would say they're worth every penny because of what they do to keep us safe, and also they kill suspended algae, so it helps the pond be clear. One thing about our projects is they're clear from day one. So the water's always crystal clear, and we guarantee that as well. So I would say the trade-offs would be that with our system, you just got the higher running costs. But what you do save a lot of money on is maintenance, because with our projects, they don't need, I would say to our clients, 1 year, 2 years maintenance is probably the absolute most that's needed. From us supporting you, and then you can go on. And we actually sell lots of projects and build lots of projects where the clients actually just maintain it themselves. So because it is easy to maintain, it doesn't actually take a lot of work from that. So that for me is how I would explain what a traditional swimming pond is and what ours is, and why ours is different. And I suppose what it's taken is, from my point of view, kind of a fresh approach to it, a fresh look at it. And we've also gone through a lot of research and development, developing our different ways of creating the best system possible. And now we've got hundreds of installs that have that in place and that are working. And, within 1 to 2 years, we should start to see no blanket weed in our projects. and certainly crystal clear from day one. And what was really interesting when I was speaking to Caroline Murray about, who's the microbiologist, is she's had an install of ours, and she'd been looking around the market and looking at other companies that do them, and she had other companies out to look at hers, and I said, what is it about our system? And she said, well, the thing is about the traditional built systems is they rely on plants, just plants, and I didn't feel, as somebody who's a professional, that was enough. And the thing is with our system, it's not just one thing, we cover about 7 different things. And I suppose, you know, in the industry, I find it frustrating when I hear, oh, we're going to have the traditional built way because we want it to be natural, because the plants don't filter the pond. That isn't what plants do. And I know that people go, oh, but there's reed beds and they help filter pollute. They don't do that on their own. There's other ways that it's done. What it does, it helps remove ammonia, nitrite, so it does help do that. But actually there's a lot of things it doesn't do. So plants in your pond is not going to remove E. coli. It's not going to remove swimmer's ear or Veil's disease or any of them things. It's not going to do any of that. And it's also not going to kill algae. So that's why our system is like a complete system to make sure that the pond is as safe as possible, as well built as possible, and actually just something you can just enjoy and have fun in. And ultimately, that's what we're doing it for, you know, so people can go out there, they can enjoy them, they can swim in them. You know, we've got clients that go in them every single morning. And it's part of their daily routine, and what an awesome thing to have as part of your routine. So yeah, I hope that's explained the difference between a traditional built swimming pool and our system. If there's any questions you've got on that, you want to email me directly. My email is mw@michaelwheat.co.uk, and I look forward to hearing from you, and we look forward to installing your project. Thank you.